Sports presents Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another episode of Benning Bites. However you get us, Apple, Google, Spotify. We appreciate it. I always say that because I'm pretty sincere about that. Another fantastic show yesterday. Kind of got away from us. Well, actually not. I mean, with Nebraska's offering and getting a commitment from an in-state quarterback, it turned into a recruiting show, even though there was a huge sports weekend with both the traditional storied franchises of the Lakers and the Celtics in trouble. Hockey is forever going to be an amazement. Lord Stanley's Cup still is the hardest team trophy to win. Just ask the Big Five, who are all but dot and data. That is done and done for those of you playing at home. But really, recruiting dominated the show with the commitment of Danny Kaelin, who in-state commit quarterback out of Bellevue West. And unless you're living under a rock, you probably already know that. But, you know, what was going on with the recruitment. And then we got into just the thoughts behind, hey, what's the offense going to look like? What's the offense not going to look like? I just think, you know, it's just part of me. In year one, I think Nebraska's got to kind of take the best available in terms of guys on the recruiting trail until they get a year under their belt. And with an in-state guy like Danny, that's one of the best available. Good offer list. And I think with Nebraska, you'll worry about the offense and how it's going to come after year one, right? You know what you kind of want it to be. You want some mobility from the quarterback. You want the run game from the quarterback. That's on record. And I know some people are thinking, well, I don't know, man. Is that going to be DK? Well, listen, they pulled it off at South Carolina. Satterfield did with Spencer Rattler, who I wouldn't consider a scrambler either. So I think that's kind of a work in progress, and we have to continue to kind of remember that. The key will be able to run the ball in the red zone, and if you can't run it traditionally, we could see some things like you saw in Columbia with that Wildcat package and some things like that. So I think from a creativity standpoint, Coach Satterfield and that staff have shown that they'll be willing to do what it takes to get the desired outcome, and that's really what it's about. And recruiting is also about development and maximizing your personnel. So I wouldn't be too up in arms over mobility versus lack of mobility or any of that. You get a chance to get a good prospect in state. I think you take the opportunity. And seems as though it happened fairly quickly, unless, and who knows, I don't even know, was it never really a done deal with Columbia and Missouri, and was he always dead set? You know, we had heard reports say, listen, man, was a Nebraska fan, you know, and so maybe Nebraska never really fully closed those doors. Maybe some situations happened behind the scenes with how he felt about Missouri and their commitment level. But however it is, Nebraska's got their in-state quarterback. And I think it's important to folks to keep it to be even keeled. There's not a direct comparison to, well, is he Raiola? Is he not? Is he Flores? Is he not? I mean, he's Danny, and I think you have to look at that situationally for what Nebraska's going to want to bring to the table, and there's a reason they wanted him in the fold. And I wouldn't waste or spend a ton of time on what option it was, plan B, plan C, plan 1A. Did they know it all along? I don't want to get in the habit of overthinking that. And that kind of dovetailed into some other discussions we've been having lately the last couple of weeks on measurables and using other sports to validate other players. And it was a lot going on. We had a couple people that were pretty passionate. Mike Sauter being one, about being for kids as a whole versus only when a kid chooses your school, right? We've seen kind of the flip-flop of how the fan base felt about Danny, and it's a long line of what happens. And I always had to remind him. I said, fan is short for fanatic. They're going to gravitate towards those that they can help the program win. And gradually over the last couple of years, we've seen that kind of turn, especially on social media, where I think the fan base is aware, hey, let's not bury this kid even though he's not ours. Don't let the empty can rattle the loudest, or the vocal minority, or whatever your terminology is. I kind of prefer the empty can rattles the loudest just because it typically does. But we've seen other folks be supported that are from this state even though they choose other schools. So that was part of Mike Sauter's rant. Which, if you missed it, I don't know. It was probably personal to somebody or some bodies or some things, and I didn't ask him because I just wanted him to kind of have his time to vent. I think when you're as passionate about young people, regardless of where they go to school, as he is, sometimes it can be bothered when the recruiting industry, or at least people in the recruiting industry, only seem to care about kids when they're at your school. So, I mean, I get that too, right? They've got a business, and their business is for their respective fan bases. So there's some give and take in terms of the grace that we should be willing to give folks. Now, what does make me mad is when we lack consistency, whether somebody goes to a school that you represent or not, using the same criteria between kids, right? And I didn't even think of this one, but I was talking about system quarterbacks, right? And sometimes if a quarterback chooses your school, the system is good. And or wide receivers, when a wide receiver chooses your school, we like that offense. When a wide receiver doesn't choose your school, we don't like that offense. And I just have a news flash. Whenever quarterbacks and wide receivers play in something, that is a system. And so if we're really going to get into how to use the terminology correctly, whatever system that quarterback's playing in is his system, and he is a product of that system as a quarterback or a wide receiver. Now, do we see a lot of repetitions and we plug and play guys for how they want to play a certain way? Sure. But he has to come with some physical attributes. If you're talking about Bellevue West, or playing running back at Omaha North, or being a quarterback at Omaha West Side, or playing O-line, D-line at Elkhorn South, right? There's a way in which, if you want to flourish at those positions, there's a way you're going to have to play. So I think we throw that term around a little too loose. Now, you can talk how portable something is. Hey, I watch a lot of these throws in this offense. Is that portable to the next level? Like, I'll get into that discussion, but whatever system that quarterback is playing is that I mean, it just is what it is. And so I want to be cognizant of that. And one of the things I think that kind of bugs me is, and Andrew brought this up during the show, and I never even really thought about it. And the whole thing started with Carter Nelson and track times, and when does productivity matter, and at what point should we be either winning state or not winning state, or I think we talked about the first round of the playoffs in 8-man, and then that morphed into Andrew was like, yeah, if we're speaking about track times, because somebody on the show had emailed in or on our text line said Carter Nelson's his events are rare, like the combination. And we went to commercial break, and Andrew goes, I can't say verbatim, but he was basically just going through multi-event people, and so he came up with Jalen Lloyd, a guy that was 10.47 in 100 meters, 9 times out of 10 that would typically win you state in the 100 meters in Nebraska. He won the triple jump, and he won the long jump, and he was a very productive high school wide receiver. Raw, but he's very productive. And he said, well, what's the difference between a guy like Jalen Lloyd and a guy like Malachi Coleman, and he said, Jalen had a more productive senior year. He had better times in track. He said if he was 2 inches taller, would he be the recruiting gem? And I said, that's a good point, because I never really thought about it like that. Some guys get track used to accentuate their football prowess, even though that could be in limbo. Some guys get football used to accentuate their track prowess. That would be a guy like Christian Jones, who's on the other end. So I'm just kind of always looking for some consistency in terms of if it's good for one, then – and we should be able to control this, right? Because it's the narrative that we create. So if by Andrew's example, we're talking Malachi Coleman versus Jalen Lloyd. Obviously, the physical traits, one being 6'2.5" or 6'3", however tall Malachi is, versus Jalen Lloyd, who's very slight, right? 5'11", 165 pounds. Like, I understand that. But the track times and the productivity on the football field are a decided advantage for one guy. The size is a decided advantage for the other. What makes it different? I don't know. I guess the story that is surrounded by each athlete that comes with it. And I don't know. I think we have to be very leery of that. The system quarterback versus the non-system quarterback. And we have all these discussions about high school athletes, and very few of us actually spend time watching multiple guys or even understanding what we're actually watching. We're relying on other people in the industry to garner our attention. So I always feel like there should be some fiduciary responsibility for those that are in the industry. With great power comes great responsibility. And that was kind of my theme. Like, if people are going to listen to you and be able to kind of dictate how they feel about individual people and have that projected, like, take that seriously, because you're forming a narrative. And if you're receiving that information, then I would say to you, hey, listen, as best you can, be a Berean. Do your own homework. Now, can you get to all high school games? Can somebody teach you how to watch film? Like, sometimes those things aren't always readily available, so you have those go-to sources. And you have to balance that dynamic. But if you're those go-to sources, man, just take that craft seriously. And it can't be because it's good for business where you start compromising the level of integrity. Like, those are the kinds of things that bug me. And I'm seeing that a lot more, especially over the last 5 or 6 years, right? Where we base how we feel about somebody or something on the amount of offers or what somebody did at a camp without actually watching football. So we're dismissive over guys like Harrison Phillips and Ben Bramer, and we're pretty excited about guys like Carter Nelson. They all, on their own individual merit, bring things different to the table, but it all boils down to, what does the film say? Then when I look at them athletically, do those measurables correlate to their output? And then you have those discussions in their totality. But too often, it seems like we pick and choose, right? Xavier Betts physically had a lot of traits. He was testing in the top 1% at his rivals camp. The top 1%. But he didn't have near the expectation levels as a receiver as, like, let's say, Malachi Coleman. Why is that? Was it the grades thing? Did we not think Zay was going to make it? Like, my point in saying that is why situationally do we kind of do we pick and choose? I don't know what the answer to that question is, but the longer I'm around high school athletics and the more that I see kids' futures jeopardized or enhanced over the hype machine. I want accuracy. Give all kids a chance, not based on what they can do for us in the industry, but who they are as players and individual people. And I don't think that's too much to ask. I really don't. And I'll continue to be passionate about it as an advocate for kids. It's another episode of Benning Bites.